Growing up in any given state, you were probably given at least one version of where that state got its name, but have you ever wondered where the other 49 came from? I've got you covered. Quick disclaimer, I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of words in a lot of different languages. Please be gentle, I'm trying my best, okay? Anyway, let's just start at the beginning of the alphabet with Alabama. Alabama comes from the combination of the Choctaw words alba, which means plant and vegetation, and amo, which means to gather. A lot of that land was cleared for agriculture by the Native Americans, and hence Alabama basically means farmer land. Alaska comes from the Aleut word alaxcax, I think, which means the object towards which the action of the sea is directed. Whatever that means, I don't know. Arizona comes from a Spanish derivation of a Tohono O'odham word, Alisonac, which means small spring. Arkansas is an Algonquian word for south wind, something that other tribes called the people who lived in that area. California is kind of where it gets a little kooky. California was the name of a make-believe realm in a book called The Exploits of Espolodon, which was apparently very popular among Spanish explorers. When they came across the Californias, some historians think that they thought that they found this ancient realm. They thought that it already had a name, and they thought that name was California. The California from the book was named after the Arabic caliph, which means leader, which is the same word from which we get caliphate. The Carolinas were named after King Charles I, using a Latinized version of his name, Carolus. The state of Colorado was named after the Colorado River, which directly translates from Spanish into the colored or painted river because of how red the water was. Connecticut is an anglicized version of the Algonquian word Connecticut, which means beside the long tidal river. The Dakotas were named for what the people we now know as the Sioux called themselves, Dakota. Delaware was also named after the river that flows through it, the Delaware River, which was named after the Delaware Bay, which was named after the first English governor of Virginia, Baron de la Warre. Florida was named by Ponce de Leon after the day that it was discovered, Palm Sunday. He took the name Florida from their phrase, flowering Easter. Georgia was named after King George II. Hawaii was named after its largest island, Hawaii, which was named after Hawaii Loa, a mythical figure said to have originally discovered the island. When Congress was originally toying with the idea of adding a new territory to the Rocky Mountains, a lobbyist named George Willing proposed Idaho, which he said meant gem of the mountain. Turns out it probably comes from the word that the Kiowa Apaches called the Comanches, Idahe, or enemy. Illinois was named after a native Algonquian people that called themselves Illinois. The Spanish wrote that down phonetically as Illinois, which became Illinois. Indiana was simply named by the French as Land of the Indians. Yet another state named after a river, Iowa. The river was named after a native tribe that called themselves Ayuhua, which the English wrote down as Iowa, which became Iowa. Kansas was named after, you guessed it, the Kansas River. The river was named after the Kansas tribe, also known as the Kaw. The word probably means something like on the prairie and was originally used to describe the Kentucky River. Speaking of Kentucky, it was named after the Kentucky River, which was named after the Kaw tribe. Louisiana was named after King Louis XIV of France. The prevailing theory that I could find about Maine was that it came from the word mainland, although some scholars think that it came from French or English cities. Maryland was named by King Charles I after his wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, also known as Queen Mary. Massachusetts comes from an Algonquian word Masa Achu Es Et, which means large hill place. Michigan comes from the word Michigama, which is an Ojibwe word for large lake. Minnesota was named after the Minnesota River, which was named by the Sioux as Minnesota, which means sky-tinted water. Mississippi was named after the Mississippi River, which is a French rendering of the word Mississippi, which means big river. Missouri is another state named after its river. The Missouri River was named after the Wimazurita people, which means those who have dugout canoes. Montana comes from the Spanish word montaña, which just means mountain. Nebraska comes from the Oto phrase ni-braska, which means flat water. Nevada is the Spanish word for snow-covered, like Sierra Nevada or snow-covered mountain range. New Hampshire was named after Hampshire, a county in England, which was named after the Old English word Hampton, which means village town. New Jersey was named after the island of Jersey in the English Channel, which Sir George Carteret, the person who named New Jersey, was from. Jersey probably comes from an Old North word yarth, which means earth. New Mexico was named after Mexico, which means the place of Mejitli, which was an Aztec god. New York was originally named New Netherland until it was taken over by the English and named after King James II, who was then the Duke of York. York, a city in England, has been around since Roman times, so it's got quite a history to its name. Its original name was Eophoric, which is an Old English word for wild boar town. The Vikings later took it over and named it Horse Bay or Jorvik, which became York. Ohio was named after the Ohio River, which was named by the Seneca people Ohio, which means good river. So the Ohio River means good river river. Oklahoma comes from the Choctaw Oklahoma, which directly translates to red people. The origin of Oregon is actually pretty uncertain, but there are two theories that I think make the most sense. The first being that it comes from a French-Canadian word ouragan, which means hurricane or big storm, after the Columbia River, which was apparently called the River of Storms by Canadian fur traders. Or it might have been an engraving error on an old French map. See, some people think that someone was trying to say the Wisconsin River, which is what they called Wisconsin, and they misspelled it as the Oracionsin. They think that the Sin went on its own line, so people thought there was a river called Oracion River, which became Oregon River. King Charles II gave William Penn a plot of woods, naming it Penn's Woods, or Pennsylvania in Latin. Rhode Island was named Root Island by the Dutch, which means Red Island. They were referring to how red the ground was because of all the clay. I found a lot of conflicting sources on this one, but the best I could find is that Tennessee comes from the word Tanaski, which is a Cherokee modification of a Yuchi word which means meeting place or winding river. If you grew up in Texas like I did, you might have been told that Texas comes from Tejas, which means friend, but there's a little bit more of a story to that. See, when the Spanish got here, the Caddo introduced themselves as Teisha, or friend. The Spanish thought that they were introducing themselves as the Teisha tribe. They started pronouncing it Teja, and they added the S to pluralize it. The whole region soon became known as Tejas, or Texas. Utah was named after the Ute, or the people of the mountains. Vermont probably comes from the French Mont Vert, which means green mountains. Switch them around and you get Vermont, which is Vermont. The Virginias were named after Queen Elizabeth I, or the Virgin Queen. Washington was named after George Washington, who got his name from a place that his ancestors came from. That place was named such because it was owned by a guy named Wassa. So Washington is a place named after a guy named after a place named after a guy. Wisconsin was originally called Misconsin, which is an Algonquian word for river running through a red place. The French wrote it down phonetically as Wisconsin. Wyoming was named by an Ohio congressman after a Pennsylvania valley which was bought by a Connecticut land company from the Iroquois, who named it after the Munsee word Huehuamank, which means at the big river flat. And that's all of them. How interesting is that? I think it's fun that all the words we use have a lot of history to them, and I figured I might as well just make a video about how excited I get about that, and so that's that. If I pronounce anything wrong and you know how to pronounce it, let me know down below in the comment box section there. If I got anything wrong, please let me know. A lot of sources are different about all this kind of stuff, and I'd love to learn and educate people. I'll put a little annotation where anything might be wrong. Also, let me know if you have any other suggestions for word origin videos. I'm so interested in all of that, and I want to know what you want to know so I can find out, so I can let you know. Anyway, that's it. Bye! Oh wow, that video is pretty good. Oh, it's been like a month since I made it, but yeah, here it is. It was pretty good. Click on the screen for other good stuff. Alright, bye again.